Good morning. Good morning, YouTube. Good morning, Facebook. We are gonna give people a few minutes to get online here. This is going to be roughly about a 30-40 video or shorter, as I have no desire to be on here for a very long time. Let me do a share. This is a video I considered doing on the 4th of July, but I decided I wanted to wait. I wanted to wait a day, first a day, then a few days. Then I realized, no, 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 no. I wanted to wait about a week from the 4th of July to make this video. Also, um, with the fact that we had Juneteenth, and now uh, we've had the 4th of July. I've spent a bit of time rereading the fullness of the Declaration of Independence, rereading it. I believe that most people who claim to be patriotic Americans have never read the Declaration of Independence in its totality. Most of you don't know what it says. Most of you don't understand it in its completeness. You only know what you were taught in school concerning it. And I honestly believe that if anyone actually read this document, if anyone, especially those who are today complaining about monuments being taken down, those who are complaining about Confederate flags not being flown. You see, we're at a point, we're at a flashpoint in history right now. This flashpoint in history is a changing wave of mindset, not only in America, but in the world. I've always, if you've listened to my videos over the years, then you know I've often compared the Southern Confederate sentiment to Nazism, the allowing of the KKK to not be listed as a terrorist organization to Hitler's Third Reich. The difference that I've always compared it to and said that the solution would be to tear down the monuments, to disallow this Confederate flag. I've argued point over point with those concerning what was the Civil War actually fought about. Many of them go into, it was fought over states' rights, but it is the state right to own slaves. 80 different times within the Declaration of the Confederacy, it is said that they are separating for their right to own slaves. I mean, the men who created this separation wrote this so to debate it today, because in the 1950s they changed the political outlook of it, because in the 1950s states changed to their rebel flag simply because they disagree with Brown versus the Board of Education, because they disagree with integration. So they wanted to reestablish this situation. More Confederate monuments went up during that time frame than in any other point in American history. And America is the only country that is allowing the loser of a revolt, the loser of a rebellion, to memorialize the losers. You do not, the comparison I've always made is that you do not go to Germany and see Hitler memorialized. Rommel does not have bases named after him. There are no statues of anyone in the Third Reich throughout Germany, other than in museums where it is taught the negative impact of the Third Reich. You do not go to Japan, and see memorialized statues. You do not go to Italy and see memorialized statues of Mussolini. You don't see these things. There is a reason why, because they lost. And what's worse about the Civil War, here's the difference. You had a group come to power in the same way a Republican can come to power, a Democrat can come to power, if a libertarian came to power. In these countries, that fought in World War II, they legitimately came into power, whereas the Civil War was a revolt against a legitimate power, against a legitimate union, and they lost. They were well within their rights to revolt. I believe that if you actually read this Declaration of Independence, that you would say that the southern states had a right to revolt because they disagreed with the North, but they lost. If America had lost the Revolutionary War, then those signers of the Declaration of Independence would have been counted as traitors and they would have been hung or shot. Those who fought against American rights, against the British Crown, would have been um, treated as prisoners of war. If America had lost to the British Crown, then George Washington would not have gotten a statue. Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, John Hancock, these people would not have gotten a statue in America or in England if the American colonies had lost in the American Revolution. But yet, people are complaining that we are tearing down Confederate memorials, statues, that the Daughters of Confederacy put up a statue in Conyers, Georgia in 1913 or 1911, whichever date it was and year it was, and the commissioner of Conyers is taking it down, and they want to put an injunction to stop them from taking it down. Georgia has a law that says that you must move it to another site that is just as great, just as good. This idea of memorializing the loser continues to foster the racism in this country. But I took some time to reread the Declaration of Independence. And we're going to go over it just a little bit. Not a lot, just a little bit. Because I want you to go read this document for yourself. And it's going to be hard for anybody watching this who's white to really read it from a black person's perspective. But I want you to read this with two thoughts in mind. Two thoughts in mind. The first thought, the writing of what is being said was written by slave owning white men, by also white men, if you're Irish or Scottish or Italian, by that the other Europeans were lesser than they were, did not deserve what is in this document. But at the same time that they wrote this document, they wrote it while owning slaves. They wrote it while saying that slavery is a good thing, that black people did not have souls. Now you got to think about this. They taught you their religion, but they taught you believing that you did not have souls. So you have to ask, why did they teach it to you? So these people who wrote this, invoking a creator, invoking human rights, invoking the pursuits of life, liberty, these inalienable rights, talking about what the King of England had done, was doing to them, at the same time was doing far worse to black people, to my ancestors. So when you question why we burn an American flag, when you question why we kneel, when you question why we show up at Stone Mountain 200 strong, fully armed because the KKK said black people better not show up at Stone Mountain, when you question why we protest, and when you question why we buy black, when you question these things and then say, well, if we hate America so much, we should leave America. When you question this, go back and read your Declaration of Independence. Go back and read what your ancestors thought about their treatment to merry old England, by merry old England, and think about how your ancestors have treated my ancestors over these last 200, almost 200 years. When you go back and read this Declaration of Independence, my white people, I want you to read it with the understanding and thought process of Jim Crow, the process of burning down Tulsa, the process of bombing Philadelphia, the process of voting rights, the process of police brutality. And then after you read it and understand it, if you can still question why we burn your flags, why we want your Confederacy gone, why we want your monuments that continue to grow and teach the next generation of young white people to be racist, when you wonder why, this is why. We want the same things your ancestors wanted, even though our ancestors were enslaved. And as a black person, if you're black and you go read this, and I'm not reading all of it because you need to read it for yourself. But if you're black and you read this, and if you don't feel and you don't start acting, you don't start spending in such a way that says that this is what you really want, because we ain't going nowhere. Just let's just get that straight, flat, and plain. White people, black people, those who disagree with this country, disagree with the police brutality, disagree with the way we're treated, we ain't going nowhere. Love it or leave it. Love it or leave it. You came and you took it. If the Native Americans had that point of view, your ancestors would have been wiped out from the first day they came here. If our ancestors in Africa had that point of view, your ancestors would have been wiped out the moment you stepped in African land. If the Indians did in India, the true Indians, they would have wiped you out as soon as you stepped in India. The Asians didn't take your mess, which is why you never colonized it. As far as you got was Hong Kong. But black people, the next time you walk into a black business and you criticize it more harshly than you criticize a white business or Asian business, the next time you say that it's too much of an inconvenience for me to drive across town to shop at a black business, the next time you question why a black militia shows up and defend the rights of black people and show us a force, the next time you question why black people are buying guns in droves, the next time black people, you don't say nothing about the fact that we have to do better in our own communities as well. This is not all carrot for black people. There's some stick coming with this as well. There's some stick. You gotta have some stick. Because we gotta step up to the plate. Step up to the plate. Stop sitting in the dang on dugout. But baseball reference. When we do have killings in our communities, now understand, white people kill white people just as much as black people kill black people. Most of the crimes committed against a race in general happens by somebody of that own race. But black people, we got to do better. We can't worry about what they do. We can't worry about what they do. We got to do better, period. Point blank. Because we are coming from the point of the oppressed. And that's coming from the point of view of the oppressed, the one that has less resources, the one that has less opportunity. We have to put a greater amount of expectation on ourselves. So I'm not going to delay you any further. I've had my rant here, but we're going to rant just a little bit more. So let me get some reading glasses on here. And we're going to go over some of this Declaration of Independence that you're saying that we should leave this country if we don't love it, while your ancestors, let's see what your ancestors had to say about this. This was a unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. It said, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the law of nature and the nature's God entitled them. Nature's God entitled them. And remember, they didn't think that black people had a soul back then. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. So when you do have those saying we should separate from this country, I want you to remember these things. We hold these truths. This is the part that all y'all know. This is the only part that most people know. They don't go beyond this. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. You were holding slaves when you wrote this. I understand you were holding slaves, and you thought that the Irish and the Scottish were beneath you and was a lesser genome of your Anglo-Saxon white males. You thought women were beneath you, and you hold this patriarchal rule over them when you wrote this. But I find it quite funny that they wrote this at the same time, this is why when people say that you can, when you know better, you do better, I question that all the time because people don't. And this is also when people say, when I'm a big believer in do unto others that you will have them do unto you. I find it odd that that people can't really grasp do unto others that you will have them do unto you. So I know it threw me off, but every time I read that line, it just throws me off. But we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are, and that's all most people know, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. That so government is present for a reason to secure those rights, just those rights. The pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of life, liberty, among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. These unalienable rights endowed by your creator, all men are created equal. That governments are instituted among men, deriving their power from the consent of the governed. Deriving their power from the consent of the governed. Now think about this. Black people don't derive their government from the consent of themselves in most cases in America. Our government was placed upon us from day one, from the moment our ancestors got to this country, and for those whose ancestors were already here, from that moment the government was placed upon you. You didn't institute it. You didn't have a part in it. For we could not vote. We could not vote after this occurrence. We couldn't vote. We were still enslaved. Our natives people were pushed onto reservations where they still don't have total autonomy. We faced Jim Crow after this, so we weren't given a government of our consent. We aren't given police departments of our consent. So we're not governed by our consent. We have very little. You have spots. The city of Atlanta. We elect the black mayor over and over again. So you may cause that one our city councilman, but our government, our federal government, does not reflect the black people. So it was an institute, derived their powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive, now hear this, white people, when the form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government. The same thing black people are saying about how the police are treating black people is what your ancestors, if you're Southern, if your ancestors came from the South, if your ancestors were for the Confederacy, is what your ancestors said about the North and their treatment towards them. Their treatment towards them. So at the same time that you say that they're tearing down our monuments, they're not allowing me to fly my rebel flag, they're changing our flag in Mississippi. At the same time you complain about that, about a history that doesn't affect you. It is not like America is harming you, white people of the South, because your ancestors fought in the Confederacy. It is not like you're being brutalized by the police because your ancestors fought in the Confederacy. It's not like you go to job interviews and your ancestors and you're not getting those because your ancestors fought in the Confederacy. You're getting all the rights and privileges. You just want to honor them and be proud of them, but still have all your benefits and rights. But yet black people are saying we're brutalized by the police, and you saw it. You finally got to see it. You finally got to look into a man's eye and see him die. You finally saw it. You're finally starting to see what we deal with. Jim Crow happened. Did it happen to the South? No, the North came in with Reconstruction, rebuild the South, get y'all set up. Birth of a Nation, the first time was the KKK coming out, having that grand coming out party. Y'all got y'all Reconstruction, but then you look at us and say something negative about reparations. I'm just saying, do unto others as you will have them do unto you. All right, let's keep going. Where did I leave off? That whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish and to institute new forms of government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. This is why the South separated. They wanted to keep that good slavery. This is why they had the revolution. All right. So prudence indeed, which dictates that a government long established should not be changed for light or transient causes, and accordingly all experience have shown that mankind, and this is very important, that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the form to which they are accustomed. Now, black people, I need you to hear that part. I need you to hear that. This is the nature of people. And they knew it back then. They understood it. There's nothing new under the sun. All people know these things. We've seen this throughout history over and over again. Right? That we can be punished, that we can be suffering in a situation. And as long as it's a manageable amount of suffering, we will abide by it. When the suffering becomes a little too great, give us a little outlet, a little bit, just a little bit. You know, we one cop go to jail, a little bit, little release. You know, just a little bit. So it's amazing how mad white people get. Oh, and they say just replace the white Confederacy, the monuments. But we get a little bit. We get a little bit. You get a little relief. People will suffer. People will be allowed to suffer. You know, Napoleon said that religion is the opiate of the masses because if they, without religion, then the poor people would rise up and kill all the rich people. Because it's a little bit. You can deal with a little bit of suffering, right? We can deal with that. A little pain, a little. You know, we dealt with Jim Crow. We just figured out how to exist under Jim Crow. You know, how to call a grown 68, 70-year-old black man is called boy by a 20-year-old white man, and that black man got to bow his head to him. We learn how to suffer a little bit. But white people, what you're not understanding is this, and black people, you got to get this in your mind, that we will suffer. And we were more apt to do that instead of changing the system. But this is what's going on right now. But when a long train of abuses and usurpation, pursuing invariably the same objective evidence, designed to advance and designed to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guard for their future security. Your ancestors wrote this, my white people. They said, when there's a long train of abuse. Now let's think about this for just a moment. When we look at the history of America that you don't like, when we look at Manifest Destiny, going across America and massacring the native people, giving smallpox blankets to the native people, fighting wars to take the land of the native people. When you look at bringing over in ships people from Africa and forcing them to work as slaves, when we look at their children being born into slavery, dying into slavery, when we look at the physical abuse of slavery, when we look at the slave patrols being created to hunt down black people who said that this form of government is insufferable and I must leave, and to hunt them down. When we look at the hangings through Jim Crow, when we look at Philadelphia being bombed in the black neighborhood by the government, when we look at Tulsa being bombed and burned down, and I don't recall seeing any court cases of white people being put in jail for bombing and destroying Tulsa, as well as Wilmington, North Carolina, and other places. No white person was put in jail for that. And those families in Tulsa, I don't understand why class action hasn't been done. We gave reparations to the Asians who was in internment camps, but for the 400 years of suffering of slavery and Jim Crow, we have yet to see anything given to black people or taught to black people, or a reconstruction. You know, your ancestors were given reconstruction during right after the Civil War. When we see that the Freedmen Bank was created in order to say, black people, here, come in, put your money here, and we'll give you loans to buy land to get yourselves into the American dream. But then that money was never given to black people. It was given to the white former slave owners to rebuild their lives after Civil War. When we see this long line of suffering, this long train of events, when the police in our communities are over policing and they're brutalizing and beating and shooting, when we see that these things happen and they're listed in this document thereafter, it's not just right here. When we see this long train and we say we want to shake off and throw off this government and form one that protects us, when we want to show up with militias, we want to shop black and build our neighborhoods, our communities, and we say that, hey, we're willing to suffer it to a point where we're willing to do it inside of America, but you get mad, you get pissed, you get upset when we want to take down these monuments that continue to remind us of that suffering, of that Willie Lynch, that Jim Crow. When we want those eradicated, when we say that these things just perpetuate the racism of your forefathers, when we say that we don't want to live on Robert E. Lee Boulevard anymore and Confederate Avenue, which has been changed in Atlanta, need to go away. We don't want glorification of the loser who said enslave our ancestors. You become insensitive towards that and hold down your ancestors as if they were great people and say they fought for state rights, but it was the state right to own our ancestors and to beat them, to brutalize them, to rape our women. You think all these light-skinned people in America came because of the genome of the black woman to create any color? Now, yes, the genome of a black woman can create any color, but the majority of light-skinned black people in this country came about through the raping of our ancestors. I want you to think about that. You don't think about those things. You don't want to think about those negative things, but that's just reality. That's just reality. And excuse me for not answering many of your questions or repeating statements, but this one, I got to get it in. I got to get it in. All right. So it continues. Such has been the patient suffering of these colonies. So let me rephrase that. Such has been the patient suffering of black people. And such is now the necessity which contains them to alter their form of systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain, or America, is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. The tyranny over black people, repeated injuries. Police officers get off, bombings happen, brutalized. It's repetitive. It's so repetitive that for a black person it's expected. We have to, the sad part is we have to have the conversation with our sons and daughters. When you get pulled over by the police, put your hands on the steering wheel. Don't move, no sudden movements. When they're even behind you, don't move around because it looks like you might be doing something. Don't get out of the car. When the police says something, just do whatever they say. Now, white people, you don't have that conversation because we've seen many videos of white people acting out towards police, cussing them out, throwing stuff, fighting them, and yet they're not shot. But a white guy goes and shoots up a church of black people, and he's apprehended. Black man runs from the cop, and he's shot in the back. You don't have these issues. You don't have to have these conversations. We have to. I have to have these conversations with my son. I have to have these conversations with my 11-year-old nephew. He's 11. I would hope that he would grow up in a better situation, but I have to have these conversations. Now, it's funny to me, some of the things that were said. Now, you guys got to go read all this stuff, okay? But they list some of the things that happened, some of what they were saying, right? And there's a couple that really throws, and still today, and how this is why I say most people have never read this document, right? Never read this document. One, he has affected to render a military independent of and superior to civilian power. Is not our military today independent of civilian power? When they decide to bring in the National Guard, when they decide to, what did your president say? He will send the military. The full weight of the military is behind the governors who wanted to stop the protesting and rioting. You have taken military independence. You have rendered the military independent of and superior to civilian power. It talks a lot about appointing governors and officials over them who are loyal to the king and not loyal to the people. Many of our city councilmen, congressmen, senators, judges, they're loyal to the governor, the president, the legislative body, and not to the people. If they were loyal to the people, then their judgments and their renderings and their voting and their bills will be consistent to the people. I was listening to a video of Joe Biden the other day from back in the day when Joe was a senator. And Joe was saying that, you know what, them black kids, we can't do nothing for them but put them in jail. We got to remove them from the street. We got predators who are going to rock, who are standing there with clubs ready to bash my mother, rape, harm my wife, harm my children. Joe Biden, good old Joe, was sitting up there in Congress saying that talking about a crime bill and imploring that we have got to get these predators off the street. And he said, they had it rough. They don't have the same opportunity. They're growing up in the hood. We can't worry about that. We got to get them off the street. It happened, but we can't try to fix that. He said that some of them, most of them, can't even be rehabilitated. That's interesting. You saying that a person can't be changed? What you think about that? You saying a person can't be changed? I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago. Hell, I'm not the same person I was 3 years ago. But he's saying that people can't be changed. This is Joe for y'all. This is Joe. Shake off your form of government. But yeah, so most of this is talking about things of that nature and trade and things of that, but no military power. He talks about for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us. This is the over-policing that we have in the black community. This is comparable to the over-policing in the black community. And here's the part right behind that. Got quotation marks. For protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders to which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states. When police consistently get off for brutalizing black men and women, when Sandra Bland, which you can tell the photos are set up where she was already dead when they took those photos. When police bust into a woman's house, and I apologize for getting her name right now, and they shoot her while she's asleep, while she's in her bed. When they come with a no-knock warrant, and a man protects his house, and they end up dead, and no one goes to jail. No one from Sandra Bland has went to jail for their crimes. When Rodney King gets beaten beyond anything that is reasonable to apprehend someone, no one went to jail. Over and over again, we see that these armed troops, large bodies of armed troops in our neighborhood, for protecting them by mock trial from punishment for any murder to which they commit on the inhabitants of black people. That's what it says. And you get mad because we want to hold these. We want the same thing your ancestors talked about. This is what they said, right? And there's one more, because like I said, I want you guys to go read this for yourself. Where is it? Nope, there's two more. Because I want you to know the people that you're talking about. He has excited domestic insurrection amongst us and has endeavored to bring on inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. This is basically when you have made sure that foreigners can come into the black community and establish businesses and take that money out of the black community, that our money doesn't circulate. When they are given privileges to get their businesses up and running more easily than someone natively born in America. When you allow them to have tax breaks for setting up businesses in our community, but yet do not do the same for those who are like us to set up these businesses in our community, you are exciting domestic insurrection. When your ancestors pit the house slave over the field slave, when they gave, in Jim Crow time, gave the light-skinned black person more privileges than the dark-skinned black person, you incited insurrection within our own community. and it's not foreign to America. I went to Rwanda back in the 90s when the Hutus and Tutsis were pitted against each other for generation after generation after generation, and then you walked out knowing that they would murder each other and then blame them for it. So when you blame us for the situation you set up, your ancestors set up. Now we do have our black people, it is our responsibility to say, okay, you set us up to fail, but we're not going to fail. We refuse to fail. But in part of us defying the failure that your ancestors set up for us, we will burn your flag. We will take down your monuments. We will teach history correctly. We will build the businesses in our community. We will own and control our schools and our education. And we will form our militias in the same way that your ancestors formed their militias against the government. Against the government that treated them barbarously, as they say in this document. There was one more. There was one more. I don't know why it's acting like it don't want me to read it. All right. That's how it's acting. But basically, just give me a second. Give me a second here. Because I don't even want to halfway not read this one correctly. So, I really want to know if you guys have ever read this document in its fullness. And if you're white, you need to read it. If you're black, you need to read it. Everybody needs to read this document in its completion. And then after that, to have the audacity to not build your community, to not help to grow the education and the finances and the militia in our communities. Um, that would be against your own people 100%. You would not you I don't know what you need to do with yourself at that point. Where is that? Oh my gosh. This is like a Mandela effect going on in my brain right now. Okay, I can't find it for some strange reason, but basically there's a charge in here where it says that you have that it first talks about how you're affecting our trade, and then you sent your armies in and your people in, and they have destroyed our towns. And I found that part very interesting, that one of the things they talk about is the fact that you came in and you destroyed their cities, their towns, violently, yet every opportunity that a black community built themselves up, the American government made sure that it was destroyed. When Tulsa, we like Tulsa, we bring Tulsa up a lot because of what happened. Um, but when Tulsa was bombed and destroyed, and the only reason is because the black people were excelling. After the Civil War, uh, many black people were elected to government offices, but then it was taken away. Only there were laws that said that if a black person took a white woman across state lines, it became a felony. There was no law that said that if a white man took a black woman across state lines, then it was a felony, but only for black people. You created situations that were, every time we did something, every time we grew, you made sure that we suffered. You changed the law. I will bet, I will bet money that since 200 black men showed up in Stone Mountain fully armed, that within 12 months, the state of Georgia will say that no guns are allowed in state parks. May even be a federal measure that comes out and say no guns allowed in federal parks. Would this have been now white people have done this over and over again, no problem. Black men show up in force and a law is created to shut that down. White people, y'all don't understand that that is how we have been governed as black people in this country. That as we grow, laws, situations are put in place. Wanton acts of destruction by civilian white people are allowed. Emmett Till beaten, but no one goes to jail. The woman claims that she lied. Nothing happened to her. Black men are accused of rape. Nothing happens to the woman who claimed it. So when we read this, if black people actually read this Declaration of Independence, white people, you have a bigger problem on your hands with black people than just tearing down some monuments. You should be thankful that all we're saying now is tear down the monuments. Or you should be thankful that all we're saying is we don't want your rebel flag. You should be thankful that all we're saying is some people saying defund the police. Some are saying it needs to be reorganized. Everybody, I personally think every black or white, I don't care, every police officer, and I've seen companies do this. Every police officer, and I'm not gonna say it the way companies say it. Well, no, yes, I am. Every police officer should be fired right now, and then put on 12 months probation. 12 months probation. So it doesn't mean that the police department would cease to function, because when they 54 police officers quit because they were called out. A couple of them were called out. Those are the kind of police officers you need to get rid of. But I would put every police officer on 12 months probation. You got 12 months to earn your job. You're not gonna walk off right now, but you got 12 months to earn your job because you failed the black community. You have failed. Let's just be honest. Not every police officer, but as a team, as a group. And the team got to take the L, okay? And some of y'all are my friends who are police officers. Some of y'all are my Marines who are police officers. Black, white, I don't care what color the police officer is because you wear blue. Take the L. As a group, you lost. Take that L. I would fire and then give them 12 months to reclaim their job. Through that 12-month time frame, there are classes that they will have to take. There will be a civilian, not internal affairs, a civilian bodies in every community will be created. And those civilian bodies in every community will reflect the community. There won't be white people in the black community reviewing the police. No, that's not going to be. No, it has to be reflective of the population that is being policed. And that body, whether it is a volunteer group or is a minor paid group, that body would provide the review for the officers that's policing them. And after 12 months, many will be fired, many will be hired. And we will have a better police force. That's what I would do. That's one of the things that I would do. Would I pay reparations? This has always been a big one for me. I would, but this is what I know. If I paid reparations right now, most black people will waste the money. You will waste it. Most black people, it will end up back into the hands of the government or back into the hands of bigger white businesses. Let's just be honest. Most black people don't know how to handle money, period. Most people in America don't really know how to handle money. You can give $100,000 to every American, and I guarantee the majority of that money will end up back into the 10%'s hand. The 10%, not just the 1%. The majority will end up in the 1% hand, but a good portion will end up in the 1% hand. But it'll end up back in that 10%. 10% of the Americans who are wealthy, it will end up back in their hands because most Americans just don't know how to handle money. So before giving reparations, I would establish a full economic training class to teach black people how to build credit, to teach black people how to build businesses correctly, which I am doing with my 360-degree program that starts on Wednesday. Uh, you got to email me, send me your email address if you want to be a part of it. And I will teach them how to buy houses, how to buy land, how to just manage the money before I give them the money. Right? You don't you know um, even though Georgia is doing this, which I think is stupid, we're giving away driver's license to kids who haven't went out and took a road test. But normally you have to take a road test to get a driver's license. It will be the same idea. You need to pass a financial management program before you get your reparations. Because otherwise, all that money could come into the black community, but it's all going to go right back out of the black community. So, what good was it, really? You feel good about it. You feel like they did something. The few who are able to take the money and do something with, you feel better. You give me reparations, yeah, it's totally different. But the average person, you give them reparations, they're going to lose that money or waste that money. They're going to buy a car, they're going to buy some jewelry, they're going to, do all these stupid things with it. Most don't have the credit to buy a house, so that money is going to, trust me, if money's sitting, will seep away if it's not put to good use. If money is not put to good use, it will go away. You will spend it. You cannot have what I think one guy said, give every black person $350,000. You can't have $350,000 sitting in your bank account waiting for you to get your credit right. And I know some people say, well, you pay off your credit and you have good credit. Most people, they're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. Most black people walk around with nothing to have credit about. I bought my little car on cash. I don't get loans. I don't have a credit card. They haven't built any credit. And you give them $350,000, how are they going to build credit? They're not. They might buy a house that's $250,000, and some smart ones will. Most won't. So I would have a class first. You got to pass this class if you want your reparations. Some people would disagree with that, but you're doing more harm to the black community, and all you're doing is pumping that money back to the Asian, Jewish, white community. It's not staying in your community. We know the black dollar only circulates for 6 hours, so why would we do that initially? We don't need to do that. So, anyway, guys, I hope that for both black people and white people, that the going over this Declaration of Independence have shown you why you're complaining about black people not being happy with this country and telling us to get out if we don't love it, or taking down these Confederate monuments and all these kind of things. Why you are being a hypocrite. Why you are being a person that cannot even fathom the idea of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That your ancestors wrote this while enslaving black people. Your ancestors wrote this while implementing Jim Crow laws. Your ancestors wrote this while they did Reconstruction for the South, but yet still allowed for black people to be hanged and allowed them to not have a fair trial, while police officers were still able to get off on mock trials for punishment. Your ancestors had this benefit of this document. Ours did not, and to a certain degree still do not have the benefit of just this document. We can't even get to the Constitution because we can't even get the benefits of the Declaration of Independence. So next year, when you question why black people will celebrate Juneteenth even larger than this year, but yet not celebrate your 4th of July, this is why. Because this document is why you celebrate the 4th of July, but this document doesn't apply to my ancestors, nor does it apply fully to me right now. And because it doesn't apply fully to me right now, I can't celebrate your 4th of July. I cannot. It's an impossibility for me to do it. When this document is fully supportive of black people, of my life, then I will celebrate your 4th of July, because then it's part of my life. It is something that I get, that I receive. But until such time, I can't do it, and I won't do it. So if you've never read it, take the time to go read this document and apply it to the history of black people and the history of America. And let's see if you still think the same way. If you do, you do. And you're some kind of special if you do. But I appreciate you guys. Y'all have a great day. I'm about to go out and get to work. Like I said earlier, I'm doing my 360-degree business mentoring program. It's going to be free this first time around. It's an 8-week program. If you really want to learn how to build your business into a system so that we can build our communities and be financially independent of begging and wishing and hoping and asking, then please take the class. If you want to build a real business and not a hobby, please take this class. After this first 8 weeks, it will not be free. And if you don't join in on the first week, which is next week, you will not be able to join in after. Once I start on Wednesday, I'm not letting you join in and have to repeat stuff and take away from the ability for everybody else. The class is going to go every Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. If you can't get up at 6 a.m. one day, if you can't be ready at 6 a.m. for 1 hour, one day a week, then building financial wealth and building a real business is just not within you. It's just not. So if that's the case, just, get better at your job. Become more marketable at your job. Okay? So y'all have a great day. Remember, you got to free yourself to be yourself because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good vibrations. Good journey.